What's up? I'm Vakin. I'm a multi-season Challenger jungler and 2-time Twitch Rivals winner, and I'm here to teach you everything I know about mastering Viego. Viego is by far one of the most rewarding characters in the game once mastered, and his unique gameplay directly ties into your overall game knowledge of how every champion interacts with one another. In this guide, I'll be covering everything you need to know outside of the champion's basic kit, so that you're well equipped with the correct information and experience to pick him up yourself. Make sure to like the video and sub to the channel, as I'm planning on releasing regular guides and highlight content. Also let me know which champions you'd like to see full guides for next. For your standard rune page, the best keystone in every situation is Conqueror, due to how fast you actually stack it and how it carries over when you possess other champions. For the rest of the tree, you go Triumph, Legend Alacrity, or Tenacity, depending on how much crowd control the enemy team has, and then Last Stand. For your secondary tree, you have a couple of different options. You can go Domination with Sudden Impact or Eyeball Collection, and then pick up Ravenous Hunter. Second is to go Sorcery and pick up Nimbus Cloak plus Transcendence for some overall better utility and ability haste. And then the last tree I'd recommend is to go Inspiration secondary with Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight. This is to gain extra gold efficiency and hit your core first item sooner. Then make sure to go an Attack Speed Shard, Adaptive, and then Armor. Going into item builds on Viego, he has a surprisingly linear build path for most games. You'll always want to start with Red or Blue Smite depending on which team comp you're against. Blue Smite for more lockdown and better chase potential, and Red Smite for better dueling in 1v1. For your build, you'll always want to pick up a Kraken Slayer as your first mythic item, then get a defensive boot in either Tabbies or Merc Dreads, then immediately rush Steric's Gauge as your second core item. This core build is aimed at providing you with the best DPS with Kraken Slayer, but also maintaining a high amount of survivability with your boots and Steric's, as your main goal in teamfights is to be able to survive damage and always possess your first enemy slain. Get an ulti, and then reset to clean up the rest of the fight. The third item slot has more variance because you can choose between Guardian Angel, Death Dance, and Navori Quickblade as a final damage item. The choice between these should be based on what you're lacking. If the enemy team has a lot of burst and you're being focused down, build a Guardian Angel. If the enemy team only has physical damage, then pick up a Death Dance. And if you're very far ahead, or find that you're not being focused in fights, then Navori Quickblades is actually the highest DPS third item. I've run several DPS checks, as well as tried Bork versus Navori in a ton of games, and found that specifically for jungle Viego, Navori outvalues Bork in both damage and utility. Your fourth item should then consist of something defensive in either GA, Spirit Visage, Death Dance, or Randuin's. For your 5th and 6th item slots, this is where you can fit in any specific tech or defensive items depending on the game situation. Upgrading your healing reduction, building QSS, general resistance items such as Spirit Visage or Randuin's, you want to get these last as a way to round out your overall build and cover your weaknesses. As a side note, I've seen a lot of people asking about going Shield Bow into Bork as their first two core items, and I've tried this build out quite a bit. It gives you better survivability on your first item, but overall less damage at the bonus of extra lifesteal. I think the lifesteal stat is a lot more valuable as a laner rather than as a jungler, as you already have access to fair amounts of healing and sustain through your jungle item, Omnivamp, Smite, and on-hit passive plus possession healing, which is why I personally don't recommend this build for junglers. One of the most difficult things about Viego is knowing how to perfectly play out each teamfight and skirmish, as everyone can be drastically different from the last. Ideally, what you're able to do is W is follow up on a teammate's CC on someone to burst them down and instantly possess them. You're not looking to be the main engage or focus in a fight, so you need to get comfortable with playing in your ease miss to pick people off when they position poorly. Or if you have the team comp for it, you can play only to follow up your allies' engage and gain resets that way. For actually using your possessions, it's best to get at least one rotation of all 3 available spells, but if you're in threat of dying from being someone squishy like a marksman or an enchanter, feel free to R out as soon as possible just to reposition. This is the bread and butter of playing long fights out as Viego. Knowing who your best targets to reset off of are, and more importantly knowing how you should be using them, will be the difference between you winning and losing fights. For example, if the enemy team has a hyper carry, but also a frontline with heavy CC, you can oftentimes just kill their frontline and then use their own engage against them to access their carries. Whereas, if you're playing versus a low damage team, you might find prioritizing taking over the enemy enchanter so that you can make the enemy's damage useless is more useful. Also keep in mind that your possessions become more valuable on some champions depending on what time in the game it is. The worst champions to take are the ones that are very ultimate reliant or whose kits synergize with their own ulti. Think like Karma, Kassadin, Lilia, and Annie. These champions are only really useful for one use of their basic spells, then you're looking to turn back into yourself or someone else. Some champions, however, have a very strong base kit to make up for their ultis being unreliable. Champions like Camille, Silas, Alistair, and Fizz are all exceptional to take and can easily allow you to turn a bad teamfight around. There are a couple champions that are unique in their strength, such as Pantheon and Seraphine, who once you turn into them start with their passives fully stacked, meaning you can use an empowered ability right away. This, however, is not the case for Annie, as she starts the game with 0 passive stacks. Another unique case is with champions with scaling kits over the course of a game. Kai'Sa, Kha'Zix, and Kayle are all not that great early game, but the later the game goes, they become a stronger option to prioritize, as you gain all of the skill upgrades that they would have when you possess them. Your standard full clear isn't too difficult to do, and you can easily get it down to an average clear time of about 320, but at fastest times you can full clear by 315 flat. You want to mainly opt into full clearing when you know you won't have any opportunities to gank in the early game and are looking to get level 6 as soon as possible. The downside of this is that you're giving up potential pressure in order to gain an individual lead in golden experience, so you need to be able to properly assess when this is the correct clear, and to be able to adapt to situations if your team needs you. This clear is for when you have laners with guaranteed setup, champions like TF mid or Nectin top, and Leona/Nautilus support. Its main use is to catch people off guard when they don't normally expect a gank from a champion that normally full clears like Viego. It does risk dropping a lot of time on your clear, however, which is why I only recommend doing it when you have laners with easy to land crowd control, or if the enemy laner doesn't have a very good escape tool. If you do get this gank off successfully through mid lane though, you are able to easily path back into your opposite side jungle and continue clearing, and maybe even repeat gank a second time after Scuttle Crab if you burn their flash on the first gank. The 5 camp clear is similar to the full clear in that it allows you to have efficient clearing, but also gives you a larger window to look for ganks on the side of the map that you finish on. It's roughly 20 seconds faster than the full clear, and you can finish it by just after 3 minutes, leaving you with a 15-second window before Scuttlecrab spawns to look for a gank. The preferred time to do this jungle path is when you want to have a balance between an aggressive early game and still be able to clear enough to stay even with the enemy jungler. Keep in mind, you can do any of these clears from blue side to red side, but clear times might vary slightly. Overall, Viego has different strategies to consider when planning his pathing, and each game can be a different situation where you'll really need to think about your game plan. Most of Viego's jungle matchups are fairly straightforward. His most difficult matchups are the ones where his early to mid game skirmishing and clearing are both outmatched. Champions such as Hecarim, Udyr, and Olaf will give you a lot of trouble up until around the 2 item mark, which is a fairly large portion of the game. On top of that, champions like AP Shyvana and Karthus jungle are hard to shut down in the early game due to their power farming being so fast and Viego lacking the tools required to punish them until he's already been outscaled. The easy matchups are the ones where you can dictate the early game pacing versus them because their clear speeds are significantly slower than yours, or they have a hard time matching you in skirmishes. For facing champions like Gragas, Master Yi, and Ivern, these champions are extremely weak until reaching their 1 to 2 item spikes, meaning that you can plan invades around their camp respawn timers to put them further behind with little to no threat of them beating you in a 1v1. Versus the early aggressive junglers like Trundle, Shaco, and Warwick, you have 2 choices to either out full clear them and have a neutral XP and gold lead, or you can play to counter gank them as these characters have long cooldowns and a hard time disengaging after committing to a fight. These matchups are the ones I find to be a lot more even and skill based, as they are the ones where your clear speeds and power are equal for most of the game, but you also have opportunities to either counter gank or win 2v2/3v3s with your laners. Matchups like Echo, Kindred, and Jarvan are the ones where you can match their clear and path intentionally to counter gank them, as if they commit their cooldowns and don't get a kill, you have a very long window to punish them and reset off of them to kill their laners. Whereas matchups against Kayn, Lilia, and Graves, you can play the early game to match their full clear with your own, and only play for ganks if you see promising opportunities based on your laners. The quote-unquote free matchups are in my opinion not losable based on you interacting with them. All of these characters have blatant weaknesses against Viego and have no counterplay versus your kit, versus Taliyah and Zac especially. If you hold your W until you see their main crowd control spell in either Taliyah W or Zaki, you can almost always avoid it, then after they miss you can stack check them in melee range. These champs are also very weak early and have a hard or impossible time matching you in a 1v1. Their only situations to gain a lead are through good pathing and playing away from you to hopefully make it to mid game where they can outscale you and potentially teamfight. One of the more advanced uses of Viego's ultimate is that you can buffer it during hard CC or cancel some crowd control altogether. For example, you can intentionally time it to tank something like a Blitzcrank hook or right before Zoe or Lily is asleep to not get affected at all. Mastering this, and getting potentially several uses out of it in a single teamfight is the key to playing Viego perfectly. Another small addition to your W is that it can be used to cancel all of your other abilities during the initial dash. You can WQ, WE, and WR, Keep in mind that using W into your R does not lose you any range on the R cast, as it buffers the furthest R cast range distance after taking into account the W dash, even if it was cast before you were in that range. Make sure to practice these to ensure you're able to get spell casts off as fast as possible in situations where you don't need to weave autos in between spells. Just a small optimization tip, mainly used while clearing, charging your W only increases the stun duration, so doing a quick cast of the spell resets your auto attack timer, letting you get off a basic rotation just a little faster. One last mechanic with Viego's W is that you can at any point while charging it cast your E without interrupting your W and still instantly become camouflaged. This does not work if you cast E first and then start your W channel, as starting an ability will reveal you for a brief moment before returning you to stealth. This is useful to hide your W full charge if someone is going to face check you while walking into a corridor, and also give you your bonus attack speed and movement speed from your E mist. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this champion guide for Viego useful. Make sure to let me know what champions you'd like me to make a guide for next in the comments down below, and come check me out live on Twitch, link in the description.